biofuel, Brasilis, niobium, Tietê, wood from the Amazon. By your powers combined, I am Boitata. Hey beautiful people, and welcome to another feeling around the dark room that is my mind. Shaman is an interesting mix. It's not perfect, presenting problems we've already seen before, but resulting in a good read. Most of the time. The comic starts presenting the world in which the story is going to take place, since the first signs of civilized colonization in South America. With the arrival of the Portuguese and the unbridled extractivism harmful to nature, it's been heard of mythical beings who came from the spirits of the earth. Such creatures made what was necessary to protect the biodiversity in the throes of death due to predatory actions by the greed of man, and through the centuries their deeds became folkloric legends. I imagine it wasn't intentional, but the problem with this kind of story is perfectly represented in this phrase: civilized colonization and unbridled extractivism. Think Captain Planet. The destruction of nature is bad, but the colonization that uses the product of said destruction is still civilized. Somehow. We need to save the planet from the overindulgence of civilization, so I'm gonna make a Kayapa kid live in a civilized manner. And if you don't wanna abuse oil, you don't destroy asphalt. If you wanna save the animals, you don't create a mountain to change the whole ecological balance of the region. And if you wanna safeguard nature, you don't fly low scaring the fish just to look cool. And it seems recycling paper isn't the best of options either. This paradox permeates the story, of course, with the older ones showing respect for the hero and the younger ones not. Yet, it is a bit better than the Captain Planety because, at least, it's not the sanitized version that it could all be perfect. Attacking nature is dangerous, the supernatural is more vengeful. So, Captain Planet from Funny or Die. Speaking of which, let's go back to the cover for a bit. This is our hero, Shaman. The cover gives out this anger from nature, or from the myths at least. Even the woman, who is more sensual than she should be, and whose existence could alone take this video's monetization away, clearly shows she's pissed off. And how does the comic handle the issue I always come back to for everything that is Brazilian? Well, this shows on the myths, equating werewolves from European folklore with Boitatá. Just notice how the only other image with a human face has facial paint and accessories similar to those of the shaman. So you have no way of knowing if this is a mermaid inheriting his image from him, or if she's from a similar origin. The symbol that connects them, the dreamcatcher, comes from the Ojibwe people from North America. And of course, the pentagram were used as symbols for representation of elements in Europe and Asia. Obviously, the comic has to call the two stars because of the legacy of xenophobia from the church that paint symbols such as this or the Eye of Horus as satanic. Even the word shaman itself is from Tungistic origin, so the idea of mixing all mythologies is embraced completely without trying to keep it really Brazilian. Or almost. One of the clever things on the cover is that the relation between the character and the myths is clear, but you don't know which will show up on the story. On the other hand, as soon as you see one of them, it's just waiting for the next one. All of them show up and nobody repeats. So you can kinda know how many battles you have left. Going back to lunchtime, the cover of that book had various characters, if not all that had been created so far. However, the author doesn't use all of them, so the cover isn't a list of who will be in the comic, but of who might be in the story. Yes, I liked the comic so much I came back to say how good it was. Of course, the following book's cover reveals more than Shaman's does, but this just shows more what I mean. Variety shows the world, but mere grouping is not necessarily variety. Another interesting thing is the design of this character here. By the way, he's better on the inside, where he's not so muscular and has more of a nature's wizard kind of vibe. Until you see him in action, you can't know what he does or even who he is. And congratulations on a good use of a tapir's nose. It's a detail whose animal association could pass you by unnoticed, and gives an unusual touch, adding a bestial idea. And now I'm not going to show the story. I think it's worth reading. However, I am going to comment on some details. First, our hero, the real Brazilian hero. This book is really Brazilian, you reader who dares to read stuff from abroad. Buy it! Buy it now! Yes, exclusivism continues to be a matter of marketing. He is an anti-hero. The way he is characterized is good, since he doesn't ignore the nature of what he takes part in. In fact, he is haunted by the violence of what he does. Second, unfortunately, there are some cases of darkness in this book too. It's not as bad as Atlas because it isn't all the time, and some uses seem better than those, looking more like shadows and being less intrusive. Third, you don't follow the anti-hero all the time. After establishing Shaman, whose participation wasn't bad by the way, but I understand not wanting to dwell too much in the same mini-episodic narrative, the story follows a reporter trying to discover who Shaman is, together with her co-worker, a reporter who dresses in short shorts and a sleeveless shirt, probably yellow. But then we have the fourth. This reporter is sexually attacked. For no reason. She gets to the hotel and finds out he asked for a room with just one bed, he pretends to be asleep, waits for her to get in the shower and says, "It ends today, that'll get you good." And he grabs her breast and gets slapped, leaving complaining that it end another guy, right? And I know this is already the fourth issue, but this one even deserves a subdivision. A, there is no reason for this being here. At the most, this character is going to be jealous of his co-worker, which surely can exist without sexual abuse. B, I can defend almost everything else in the comic sexualization. She wears revealing clothes, but they were in a tropical forest in the middle of a country where the asphalt creates mirages in the middle of winter. At the same time, the whole story has a 70s vibe to it, so it also fits aesthetically. You could argue how much of this author's choice is for fan service, but it still seems to be up to the author. I can't say the same for her undressing, where her nipples got so much attention that it even made Yara seem less sexualized. A little less, but less. And of course she's Yara and not a mermaid or a siren. Didn't you see he's the real Brazilian superhero? But the worst thing to me is that, see, she keeps working with him. Yeah. She says the guy tried something like this before, he clearly planned it all, and even thinks it wasn't any big deal and that she overreacted. Why the hell would anybody continue in the same place? Not to mention that she continued working with him as if nothing had happened. And that's the biggest problem in this kind of thing. Naturalization. New concepts are naturalized into society. Just think about that person who still calls you even when there's no urgency, when they can send a message. Some people still don't think it's natural to speak through writing. The same way the internet was a treat for Saturday after 2 p.m., text messages were extremely expensive, cell phones were a luxury, and there was a whole system of pagers for emergency communication. And yes, kids, I'm talking about that strange machine at the end of Infinity War. As time passes, an idea that's present starts being considered normal if it isn't challenged. So this kind of scene basically says it's normal for a woman to be sexually attacked. And I know some people might think I'm equating the attack to rape, as many fanatics on the internet do, but no. The point is, why would you think the abuse is normal? Our comprehension of sexualization is still evolving, and I'm sure this has seemed as a strong character by comparison. That due to there being a time when being strong meant not being bothered by other people's abuse.
Alright boys, we've got plastic to sell. Wipe the jizz off your chins and get in here.
But this comic is from 2016. Really? The Maria da Penha law was 10 years old already, and we are still making stories where the crimes are ignored? And yes, this is what you're doing when you blame the victim. Fortunately, this is an island, which tells me this could easily be avoided, but also means the rest of the story doesn't really use this part, outside of the jealousy. It's like that thing that an uncle or a grandfather still says. You still like them, but you can't pretend it's just an opinion. Still, I continue to think it's more important to point out the error to prevent it being repeated than denying the whole story. And the story is good, up to the half point at least. Getting to the end it gets slower, which is more noticeable exactly for the pacing being good before. And finally, fifth, the story keeps going, getting even more mythology, expanding the scope and promising even more action. To be continued! Really, why do you do this? There's a reason Justice League Unlimited didn't start with multiple part stories like its predecessor. Not only are they introducing a fuck ton of characters, they're introducing a new story format, in which the audience won't anchor themselves to a specific group of characters, but on the kind of story they'll see on every episode. It's as if they show the hero being trained, becoming capable of finally reaching his enemy and... jump good! Yeah, well, actually, it's more like if the first episode of Samurai Jack ended with the future guys calling him Jack. In other words, you must never introduce something without finishing. The first half was still enough to get me interested on the character, and I'm curious to see how the story continues, just not as much as I could be. It definitely suffers from not ending sooner, besides of course being interrupted by sexual assault. Potential that's stained by poor decisions and terrible traditions. But I would still read the second one. At the moment of this video being edited, the author is raising funds to publish the second comic, to which I've contributed. But the problem with this kind of story is perfectly represented and unbridled extractivism. And it seems recycling painting symbols such as this and the Eye of Horus. Due to the on the other hand, I am however going to comment and no. Yes, exclusivism